Hi, my name is Larry Metzger, and today what I'd like to do is give you a little background and introduction and express my interest in applying for the English lecturer position at Johns Hopkins University's Center of Language Education. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. This is my family. I'd like to talk today a little bit about academic qualifications, university teaching experience, research publications, as a Fulbright scholar, and pedagogical examples of course materials for communications, writing, public speaking, and some extracurricular activities. Qualifications, my background is an MA in TESOL from Columbia University Teachers College. I studied through the Tokyo campus and at the campus in New York also. Also, I did another master's degree before that at the University of Kansas in Soviet area studies, focusing on history, political science, and philosophy. The bachelor's degree, which that was based on, is in Russian language and literature, where I focused on Vladimir Solovyov. This built into my master's thesis for continuing work in history and philosophy. While I was at the University of Kansas, I did my degree in Soviet and East European Studies building. I was the president of Bettenfeld Scholarship Hall. I was the chairman of the Student Rights Committee, FLAS grant recipient. And then a few years later, based on that, I received a Fulbright scholarship to study under the Polish national historian at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, where Copernicus was. And later I was coordinator of the Fulbright program in Ukraine in the early 90s. Right now, in terms of teaching experience, I'm teaching in Kazakhstan here at Nazarbayev University. The courses I've developed on Moodle are academic writing for graduate students, academic communications, and accent reduction, and the other one is in public communications. The students that I teach are pictured here. These are the education master students, and this is the cohort for this year with some other fellow teachers that I work with. We just finished here. While here, I've been the judge the past 2 years for the Toastmasters group, and for the American Corner, I work with Fulbright students and other ELF faculty as a judge for the spelling bees. During summers, I teach at UC Berkeley. The last 3 years, I've taught academic writing, integrated skills, film and historical critique, academic communications, advanced vocabulary, and this year I'll be teaching human rights. These are some of my students from the beginning intermediate group, mostly from mainland China, last summer at UC Berkeley. They're a very good group. This year I'll be doing some more work with students at that level. While I was in the Middle East for 9 years, I wrote some grants. This is the Middle East Partnership Initiative grant, which I wrote for Qatar University while I was teaching there and developing courses for their post-foundation program in foreign affairs. This is the action plan which I set up through the U.S. State Department and U.S. Cultural Attaché. We began to implement the grant for female leadership in the Student Senate. While I was there also, I wrote and gave presentations for Kato University, and I did a comparison between Kato University and Kwansei Gakuin School of Policy Studies, where I taught in Kobe, Japan for several years. While I was in Oman, something else I did was I wrote a Middle East grant in education on how to integrate critical thinking into teachers' beliefs and methodologies for Sultan Qaboos University. This fit within the Omanization process for the country, where critical thinking skills were positively correlated to student employment and career success. And I showed how this could be done with some of the applied linguistics courses. Here at Nazarbayev University, I don't expect you to read this, but this is just an overview of the syllabus, which I helped to develop with the knowledge, skills, and strategies and learning outcome objectives for academic communications. Much of the phonology, the suprasegmental, and the segmental work I did with students is based on this. We had 2 semesters. I developed an audio log system using MP3 files, which are submitted through Moodle. The students were then critiqued They could use different thematically based listenings that were academic, from which to provide critical reflections, and then to exhibit their ability in listening comprehension, finding main ideas, and also expressing this. The rubric which I developed for their summaries included critical reflection, vocabulary, academic and language delivery, and academic language, grammar, and register. All of these elements contain phonological components as well. Well, in terms of accent reduction course, the students came in with a heavy Russian and Turkic Kazakh accent. So questions of how to improve their accent, what are hard words to pronounce, and other problems came up often. I focused on areas like basic sentence stress and word emphasis in English, looking at how the intonation patterns vary depending on what the structure of questions and responses are. Research shows 70% are suprasegmental features and 30% segmental. So I focused on syllables, word stress, basic sentence strengths, prominence, and thought groups along with intonation patterns to improve the student's ability. Some of the textbooks we use look like they would be also very good for your teaching assistants at Johns Hopkins University. Gorsuch's book, Janice Smith is another excellent one that we've used elements from in the program here. Now, in terms of rhythm in English, looking at what are stressed words and unstressed words are important. Focusing on nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. Doing exercises like these were also part of what students did. In addition to technological elements such as the visual thesaurus, using the academic word list, integrating the two so that it has an exponential effect on the students' written and spoken abilities in the higher level vocabulary. To develop sentence use and structure, I used the academic collocation list and the COCA, Corpus of Contemporary American English, as well, along with using elements like the phonemic alphabet. The IPA is something that was like a foreign language for students, but it was helpful for most of them to learn how to integrate that to improve errors in their pronunciation and speech. Connected with that were elements of articulation, diagrams which show at what part of the mouth, lips, and tongue different words were voiced or expressed differently from their L1. Now, in terms of my syllabi for public speaking, I developed one for UC Berkeley, which I've taught for a few years. It has oral presentations. Students are able to use the Canvas substrate with modules that are integrated and systematically build their skills in an intensive format. At Nazarbayev University, I developed the academic writing course here for the entering graduate master's students. I also developed everything connected with the literature review, some of the elements of case studies and genre analysis. Now, one example of a course lesson plan that I developed for the master's students in communications here relied on relevance and concision in how to conduct academic interviews. To help the students to become more concise and to develop a type of rhythm, I used elements of haiku to show how brevity and accuracy can be used to take dry lessons for vocabulary acquisition and make them into 5 and 7 and 5 syllable rhythms that had a certain meaning. So the collocation aspect and having a deeper meaning to the context was something students could work with. They could be creative, and so these are some of the elements, like in the night twilight, only the mushrooms are bright, reflecting the moon. Elements like this were used with handouts, integrated with PowerPoints, and I used the academic word list, which I showed earlier, this case sublist 9, with a haiku worksheet to allow students to work individually and together to create their own poems and then share them. And then we would work on the phonology and then some of the intonations that would be with that also. I showed them how this was done with some exemplary models, and then how this is a way of building clusters in English for them in their spoken and written discourse. I also went back to former research for the listening and speaking aspect to focus on how students could discuss their preferences in learning and teaching style diversity. I went back to Jung, some work I had done when I was in Japan. I was coordinator of academic writing program. At that time it was computer assisted. I wrote a research article and I published the results for 433 students. I showed how the preferences in motivating activities, learning environment, preferred evaluation methods, and orientation priorities did represent certain preferences that you could map out among students using linear regression analysis. I also integrated this with my group of teachers here at NU to show how preferences in teaching style with favored techniques of instruction, learning environment, and evaluation methods also correspond to certain clusters. Now, for the Oxford material I used taped intermediate and advanced interviews that were professorial interviews for students to take notes on, and then they would summarize their notes, write them, or then discuss them. They learned how to go through perspective and stance, how to recognize these elements and phrases along with signposting to make their communications more fluid and academic. The worksheets I developed always followed after students had a chance to work together in a task-based approach with a content thematic focus to then look at the answers and compare. Well, this is a little background of my family in Japan. My two sons, my wife, they're in Beaverton, Oregon. While I'm here in Kazakhstan, I'm completing my semester here. And this is my extracurricular activity along with icon painting. Thank you very much for listening and viewing. Please let me know if you have any questions. You'll be able to look through this material connected with the link that I give you to Google Docs. Thank you very much.